So I bet you all are wondering what the heck I'm saying when I say pictorial narrative, the contradiction in terms thing. Um, if you're following last week's, where Jordan Peterson and friends are talking about the idea of narrative, uh, and then being unclear whether in their own minds even they think the possibility is that a melody is a narrative. And a narrative, of course, being a description of one thing following another, sequential, whatever. And I just decided to go ahead and take some license with a word like that and talk to you about one of my favorite subjects, and that is composition, the pictorial in particular, not the old school composition. But so if you look at this picture, we're talking about narrative in the old way. This narrative is, this is called absinthe, and this woman in the middle seems to be a person of low repute who's sitting there drinking this drink that'll help her to forget or whatever, help her to get through the night or however that works. And the character to the right being relatively dissolute looking, equally so. And here they are hanging out together in a cafe that's all but not operating by the look of it. So that's narrative in the old sense, and that's when somebody asks, if somebody, a docent takes you into the museum, that's what that person will tell you about. But they won't tell you about the pictorial narrative. And now I'm using, as I said, license, but pictorial narrative, but I'm really talking about what the behaviors, the things that happen in a picture pictorially. So purely visually, and having nothing to do with the anecdote, okay? Or the subject as illustration would have it. So, but before I start, let me actually thank 5 people today: Christopher F., David D., Benjamin C., Stephen J., and Edward K. for your really kind contributions, donations. This has really been such a benefit to keep us going. And rest assured that I recognize that as an expression also of your appreciation of what I'm doing, what I'm trying to do. So I hope we can keep value coming to you. That the way I'm presenting actually is done with enough quality so that you can actually get value out of it. That's something useful in your painting life. Anyway, so I hope you have some fun with this. When I talk about composition, I do a composition class online, and I do one in person as well, but composition workshops. And the online one is one that can work pretty good because I don't have to come in and critique your work standing in front of you. I can just look at it. As Gamble used to say, we'd bring a picture in it for him to look at, a landscape, and if he wasn't able to go out in the field, he would look at it and say, "You understand, I can't judge your colors and your values on this picture, but I can tell you whether or not what your composition is doing." And we can talk about things like that, what this thing has in a rectangle. And so for whatever reason, I'm not even sure the reason, I put this in a chronological order. I think I was trying to sort out in my own mind whether or not he was getting more and more adventurous, Degas. But this is going to be an entire walkthrough of Degas' work, of numbers of aspects of his Degas' work, with that same mentality that Gamble expressed, that he's always interesting. But he's always interesting pictorially. He's not without subject, but his subject thing is pretty shallow, and it's never anything what I'd call important. And so if that's something that you are looking for here, change your mind for a minute and just join me and try to see if you can see what the pictorial has by way of, shall we say, entertainment now, or of intellectual value. All different now from the subject itself. And by the way, it doesn't mean that the subject itself isn't a factor in all this. The subject, I mean, you can paint a woman in a carriage with a child at the horse races 1,000 different ways. What you wind up with is going to be in some way consistent with the subject, probably, if the subject is very important, or it's simply going to be consistent within itself abstractly. And anyway, but let's just talk about it. This is early Degas. This is not early, really, but he's 35 here, I guess. He was born in 34, so he's 35 years of age. In this painting here, we can just talk about some of the fun he's beginning to have. A lot of people don't recognize what we mean by that kind of fun, so I'm just going to address it a little bit in this early picture. But here you see Degas doing a curious thing. He's taking a picture and flipping it. He's got a big light up here and a dark down here. And the big light breaks up into other lights down in this portion of the picture. And I wonder if you guys would be happier with this particular one if I use my laser. Is that better? I'm not convinced that's better. I'm going to undo that. Let's go back to my arrow. And then what he did also is he has the darks down here breaking up into the sky and into the middle tones, the darks massing and doing a distribution inversely, right? So it's like one going into the other. And this is a thing that Pierce, is a worthwhile read, Cyril Pierce, calls interchange. But Degas is doing that. That's a purely abstract device. Now, what I'm going to mention to you about Degas is the guy is like a poet in the sense of rhyme schemes and rhythms and repetitions and like sounds, picking up again and again. And he does it in many, many, many ways. In that way, in that kind of way, we mean he's a poet in that sort of the old school rhyming world way. And at first you don't see that much. The one on the right I have a hard time with even liking it as a composition of those in the earliest ones I saw. I think it was at the Met. And the one on the left is, but the one on the left begins to do something, and the dates, by the way, I said 1870s, I think both these are from that time. I'm a little bit off in a couple of these, I just didn't have time to chase it down. But you can see he has already said to himself at different points in his notebooks, well, let's try putting a series of pieces of fruit. Let's create a series out of pieces of fruit, or pieces of, so in this case, it's pieces of his dancers, right? And he's creating a series of dancers, and the series is the equivalent of some sort of a rhyme scheme. He's talking about dancers over and over again, and he's created this interplay between dancers, except it's not about dancers per se. I mean, sure it is, but it's really, you can see it's much more than that. It's about size relationships and variations within like all these dresses they're wearing are the same on the left one, and all these, they're white with pink bows, right? So they're all the same, but what is he doing with them? And so we're talking about now, when you say what he's doing, that's the thing I really want to get composers to think about. It's not what it is, it's what it is doing. That is such a huge thing that lends credence to a word like narrative. What is it doing? Oh, it's first doing this and then doing that. Well, you can see that the girls on the left are bigger and they're getting smaller as they go to the right. And as they sweep, and they're curving into the picture. So these are all action words. They're all sort of rather 1, 2, 3. And in reverse, the windows are starting on the right and getting smaller going into the picture in a counter line, a line that beautifully counters the other line. So there's this response, there's this action, and there's a responsive action. It's very characteristic of compositions. You know, when Jerome talks about the main line and the secondary line, I like to use the word counterline. What is that? What is a main line? What's a counterline? But a counterline would be a line that sets off. So I talk about the spokes. My fingers are spokes. And if you could call this a curve and you call the inside of my knuckles a curve, you begin to see a counterline to a line, or these would be the counterline, and this is the big line, right? However you want to think of that. This one almost does that, right? Great sweeping actions through here. Sweep, sweep. See the sweep right here? You see it over and over again. This is what you're going to see. If you start looking big at pictures and you're thinking about, if you have an idea that there's a linear aspect to these things, there's a values aspect and there's a color aspect, so that you're going to run into, I'm going to try to cover all these things. I'm going to go through any number of Degas, so we'll get to all of it. But what we're talking about, this isn't one of the more exciting. It feels like you might be able to do something else with it. You could almost feel adjustments possible. But in a sort of a countering way, these dark guys are sitting out, all the darks are sitting out, trucking across this way through a picture that has essentially its essential action. And the other is this other action here. If you want to call that big action, this big sweep here, this big sweep here. You see what I mean? We're talking about that, and a counteraction this way. So whatever it is, but this is in the very nature of harmony, the very nature of unity. Now, Degas at some point here is designing with what we call pusherbacks. And and again, you have that same sense of inversion we just showed you a minute ago, where you have the lights up here breaking up into the darks. Here, the darks are sitting here breaking themselves up and getting smaller and weaker into the light masses, right? Big, dark blobs. Here's one grand mass. Here's a group of middle masses, and all these littler ones as they get grayer and grayer going up into this zone here. Now, there's much more to it, but you can see how this is a stepping in, you can, and I suggest to a student of composition that you try to verbalize sequences. And again, that's in the version of what I guess Peterson would have called melodies, or rather it was his other counterpart there, using that term. You can see a lot of different sorts of things. This one isn't quite the same. This is, I mean, that's saying, and again, remember, when I'm looking at these, I'm only looking at what we have in front of us. I can't vouch for most of these being particularly good. I don't think most reproductions are very good, but they contain enough for us to get excited about some of the ideas. But you can see these, what you want to call these diagonals of light here. This is basically a dark picture, very striking, strong diagonals of light or chunks of light up here, and then getting into a very complex unit of lights in the top middle tone area. So, but how do you want to talk that through, right? I mean, you can see various things that he's doing. Like this becomes sort of like this big X or V or something or other, this complex thing. And you see a big, similarly complex with the counters of these guys playing against these guys. You see systems that seem to be replaying. So I'm going to call them harmonies, and he just uses that term. He says, my picture is done when it's in harmony with itself. So all these parts are harmonizing, right? There's an element of the harmonious. And so that suggests things like rhyme schemes, and certainly schemes, right? Color schemes. I mean, fundamentally, color schemes. You could say about this picture, by the way, that it's a warm picture compared to this one, which is a cool picture. I don't know that that's true, but in reality, and I think these were done multiple years apart, so they may look like they're of the same era, but I'm not convinced that they are. Nevertheless, there's so much you can see down here. The ride, or the sort of SE ride over here, that you can begin to see a similar thing happening. These, I say SE, it's a curving, a snaky line snaking through. But you see patterns like that and repetitions in Degas all the time. This is pictorial. You can see why the guy would like to have been a decorator. This is pictorial stuff. Now, one of the things that we know about in painting is the frieze. I mean, Degas we're very aware that he understood the frieze. From the very earliest pictures, he was doing the Spartan youth, and those look like friezes. Those obviously we're talking about Greece. And the figures are lined up as if they were all the same, more or less, the same size across the plane. A group on one side, a group on the other side. And so what he was doing is making interesting shape patterns limited to, and form, etc., but limited to that plane. And then there'd be a secondary plane, a minor plane. And all these are both the same thing. They start doing something else, which is rather interesting, and that is moving their way into the picture. But you can see how he starts with this big dark blob, and then he goes to a middle-sized dark blob and gets to a little dark blob as he travels into the picture to this little weak spot over here. And this picture is essentially doing the same thing. And these rides he's taking, he's using similar backgrounds and everything, but he loves doing variations within a single, what should we call, motif. Again, you can see that the ride he's taking is a diagonal movement. This is a diagonal movement. This is supporting it. This is supporting it, right? And then it's all this action, all these pointy little eggs and all sorts of different things as they entertain us in their travel from right to left. Oh, yeah, from right to left. Bunching up in some places and clarifying and rather itemizing themselves in other places. But do you see how I'm speaking about this? Now you can similarly talk about color schemes. Let's just keep going on here. Well, I wouldn't pick on this one as the gift of the color scheme that keeps giving it, but there's some that we really will. But this, what do you want to call this these runs? You want to call them runs? So he's got these little heads. All the guys in the orchestra are running across here, and all the big instruments pop up here, and then surely enough, you're going to almost hear the pattering of the feet and the noise of the violins as it goes, as the dancers go across the tip, on their toes across the stage. Do you see how I'm actually trying to narrate this? But do you see that it does this? So this is where I like to think of these things as action pictures, right? But there's this travel, though, this travel here that fuses itself into this travel here, but it's all coming, it repeats over and over. The lights are doing this kind of travel, the legs are doing this kind of travel, the darks are doing this kind of travel, and the heads are doing this kind of travel, and there's your line, right? There's your line. And your counterline is whatever. It's this, largely this, right? And interplay in a relationship to all this whole pile of stuff here. Narrate it to yourself. Talk to yourself about how this is going from there to there and what it's doing in the ride. So if it's a ride, I'm trying to narrate the ride, okay? I'm calling the race. It's interesting to watch him, go from Degas go from being a maker of friezes, and this is rather like a frieze, to being to start to tilt those friezes and make them move into pictures. To take the frieze and just shift it a little bit so it rides into the painting. But even before we get to that one doing it, this one I find this enormously amusing. This big central mass that's sort of Xing out of these blacks notwithstanding. This white mass sits here, and then you have this bang, 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 bang travel, like it's an echo of her head, just echoing its way right up into the left side of the picture. The lights, that's the light travel. Now you see the harmony of that. You see the tune he's creating, and as much as Corot calls his pictures little tunes, and I agree that they are. I don't know how you can talk about Degas without thinking music, without thinking runs of notes, right? But it's all about the interplay. These are the kinds of things that happen when you start talking about the interplay of the abstractions. Everything I'm talking about is what we mean by the pictorial. Nothing to do with girls and hats and any of those kinds of things, right? It's purely pictorial stuff. Just take the orange over here and the head and the stuff over here and look at the distribution of these warm notes throughout this picture. That's a game in itself. But the lines, these lines here, and the picking up of lines and more lines, it's just as this is harmonizing. This is rhyming. And he's doing it, of course, consistently, rhythmically, right? And he's doing with variety. So here he's got the two arms going down the legs, two arms going down the legs. He's doing it a different way over here. Has this one turned to the right and this one turned to the left. So you're just building on this idea of this great sweeping form, this great form going this way, right? It's building on that idea. These guys, the way they're projecting out, and they're projecting out, rather form the counter line to a move that's deep, a deep curve. You feel it? That's me talking. That's me narrating. Can you get this? I hope I'm not shocking you to death. You're going to get so much fun out of this stuff, and then what's going to happen is I'm going to make you very miserable, because when you look at other painters, you won't find that they actually contain that level of if you want to call it rhyme and rhythm of poetry, and you may start missing it. Degas, this is 1879. Degas, 10 years later, he's starting to do things that are, in one sense, extremely obvious in the way we're talking. Here he's got this thing called the circus. He's got this building that runs on a diagonal roof, vertical sides, and then diagonal ceilings again down here. I should have said ceiling above. But you can see it's a zigzag, zig, zig, zig. Oh, and that's what the figure's doing. Zig, zag, zig, zag, zig. What the heck is this? And it's all sitting on a ride going this way. Now, can you follow that? Can you follow the idea of the color scheme? By the way, the idea of a scheme also suggests that. We'd usually say this is basically an orange picture with the secondary, as the greens are secondary and the feature node is such and such. That also is a way of narrating what's going on in the picture. I love the word narration, and I haven't used it before recently. I've just been trying to figure out a way to get people to think about these pictures without thinking about what they're about. And what's going to happen if you become a really good impressionist and just learn to hit notes and understand how they are feeling in other relation to other notes, you're going to start seeing this beauty in nature. And you'll start realizing that these things derive from nature itself. That's actually who Degas was as an impressionist. He actually takes this is all derivative. So he'd spend his time there in the orchestra pit or in the back halls of these opera places, ballet, of these dance halls, whatever they're called. And it's watching for pictorial possibilities. What makes interesting? What makes interesting, and how would this all hang together? One of the things I like to point out on the left one is what he's doing here. He's got basically dark, middle tone, and light. He's got red, yellow, and blue. I mean, he's doing fundamental things with, that's if you're not doing variety, you're not talking harmony, right? Harmony doesn't mean anything if you don't have enough variety. But he's talking about varieties of types of objects even. He's talking about harsh, hard-edged things, and he's talking about lost, fluffy things. He's talking about fat, formal things and flattish things. He's talking about simpler areas and busy, broken areas. Do you begin to understand what I'm doing? I'm calling the race. I'm telling you what's happening in this picture. So you can, once I say to you, this is busy, then you can say, oh, that's busy too, in a different way, and this is busy too. Oh, look at these busies and how they interplay. And there's the artist. Now, a lot of that stuff, when you start talking about it, you're going to see it, and you're going to have to learn to manage it without trying to dominate it, because you're going to be simplistic and boring in 5 minutes if you think you can control this stuff. But you can manage it. It's like managing a garden. You can't make it do what you want, but you can manage it. Okay? So here again, that great sweeping line, sweeping, and all of it traveling on this line here, all of it moving in through here, right? You feel it all? Feel it all? Total synchronicity, 101, okay? Now here is really marching the figures into the picture, right? Really marching them in, much more so than the horse ones earlier. So he sets up the women on the chairs in the front, resting their poor feet, as it were, it looks like, and the other one's doing whatever, and but there's this trucking in, the travel, the grand S-curve, the travel, that ride in, and the interplay of, if you want to call it, leg units, right? Various things like leg units and the interplay of these things as they travel. You can see, take a thing like a blob of a head, and you'll see sets. Degas sees everything in sets. He sees the sets of the dresses. Now, he's not about the dresses. It's about that blue note and about some qualities that they have in common. But you'll see also the distribution of the orange notes and what they mean. What does this dark red mean, traveling through here and down in through here? What is that? What is that? Do you see that? Do you see aesthetics everywhere? Do you see beauty everywhere in the rhythms and rhymes of these things? I'd love for you to tell me it's just simplistic and it's just too simple for words, and life can't be so simple. I don't mind. Again, that's one down below, and these are just more of the horse race ones where he's cropping tightly and getting, using block shapes to do most of his work, and then he's backing off and getting a whole different. But here's the travel in again, and the variations in, like you take the oranges and you got all these variations in the oranges, all that entertainment value. The greens talking to the greens. He loves to put in these fields where you have all the different colors mixed together. So whenever this guy, orange guy, horse needs some help, you can find it over here. And when the greens guys need some support, you'll find it down here, and the blue guys, and so on. So you'll see that in Degas, every note is a color note as well, because every part has these interconnections. And that's where one of those things that the Peterson people were talking about in the previous videos, the sheer complexity of nature is beyond our control, beyond our fathoming, truly. It's beyond our grasp. But we can play with certain elements of it. We can get a lot of it to work for us, to the point of finding, drawing forth enough to please and to elevate the soul, to generate a sense of harmony, which is so huge in life. Innate sense of harmony. This is pure poetry to my mind. Here's doing another variation on what we call the pusherback. Pusherback is a Paxton term, I think. He's talking about a dark mass in the front. You see this with Vermeer, dark mass in the front, and then a middle ground zone, and then a final zone out there. Fairly typical stuff. In Degas' case, he's using these rich notes. He's using these rich notes through the middle in each case. But you see in all these cases the echoes. Here's the darkest version of this red. You see a really rich version of it, and then you see another version of these reds. as it were, they're the red. So it's not so much, this is where Degas would tell you that it's not so much that they're reds as that they are the red in this setting. And so they become connective. They become connected to all the other ones. But you can see him playing even the V's here and the V's, the fan, the idea of some of the V-ness of the fans. And I'm not going to talk about this one. It's not as entertaining, but it's still just marvelous. We've talked about these before, and you can look at a couple other videos I've done on the subject of on the composition subject, spotting, main lines. Look at those, and have this discussion will come forward to you. So here we are again playing the same thing. This is everything now moving in. You turn from a freeze and you just turn the freeze, and now the patterns, which are fascinating, still fascinating, are getting littler as they go. And you can see this movement, the reds, and then jump up here to pick up all these reds in the sky. And there's all this stuff up here are picking up full of the greens that you're seeing redistributed all through here. It's just pure harmony. You can see why the guy wanted to, wish he'd been a decorator. I'm not going to, or wish he'd had an opportunity to be to do a decoration. So these are the 1890s. And by the way, I can't do all these. I'm going to run out of time. So not clear how much time we're going to have. So if I get cut off, you're gonna just smile, okay? My producer won't, so I better hurry up here. But you can see again, it's the same old thing. If you look at these kinds of shapes that are happening down here, you'll see them again repeated up here. You'll see the movement through here, through the body, through here. You see the run of these things running off at different angles, interplaying, different colors, different angles, different powers. The strength of the center of interest is always classically the center of interest. He's never breaking the rules, as people want to say. Not the rules of visual beauty and visual harmony. Never breaks the rules. Yeah, there's a study in orange and blue. It's like a Cub Scout tie or something like that. The wide range through the oranges and the yellows to the orange to the reds. This kind of travel is a classic thing that he does. The much more neutral version of those that begins to combine the green and the red. This is where you understand the guy understood impressionist color fusing and et cetera, et cetera. Much more to say about all these, but I have to keep moving. One though on the right is one of my favorites at the Museum of Fine Arts. Again, it's the reaching. Remember what Christ said that if children don't praise me, the stones will start praising me. But this is like here, these people, the dance, and all of a sudden Degas is picking up with his eyes this great line here. Did he pick that up? Did he just see that? And while he was watching some things happen, he's got the biggest eyes. Degas, an impressionist, got big eyes. He's seeing everything. He's seeing things as wholes and things as potential pictorial entities and unities and interplays. But what is this? But as simple as that: blobs of dresses and runs of lengths. Another variation, very similar. You look how the toes are interplaying back and forth to this mass up here. And right through the middle where it's calmer, you have the center of interest by, as it were, default. The darkest darks are there, and it's the human element, and it's facing you that gives you some support there for strengthening as the center. Yeah. And so I'd love to call this something, maybe the world of repetitions is repeated patterns, whatever. But I love this great line here. And the fact the way it picks up again is absolutely continuous, right? Blah, 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 whatever. Maybe even going from here into here and getting more vertical as it goes this way from here. But there's so many ways to see this. The simple unity of this thing is staggering, right? And then he's also running this thing as in this direction, right? It's very evident what the travel is of this picture. I'd like to call this rows or repetitions. This whole thing is just rows and repetitions, head repetitions, hat repetitions, massive body, vertical barb, dark repetitions, anything you want to call them. But look at them interplaying. These are, as I said, I'm narrating this for you like I'm watching a golf match. But having seen that, can't you see it again over and over again here? And this is one of those fun tricks, playing the dots, including the woman's head, is part of the dot system out here. But the dot system is acting like W's. Oh, they're the W's. Oh, look at that. She's playing the puppy, by the way. She's singing a song that's got something to do with that. And it keeps on playing these diagonals in a way that has some synchronicity, as I said before, with all this stuff down here. And again, the yellows and blues and the way they harmonize. And he's always giving you the red, yellow, blue. He's always giving you that enough content so you can say, yes, it's complete. It doesn't feel jaundiced or limited. I like these two where the models are exiting. And you can take these in many, many, many different ways. I'm going to have to stop talking about them, but just the simplest one, you can see these verticals all day long, but what you got to see is this sweep here that keeps happening and happening and happening. It isn't that there aren't verticalities in here that keep happening through but he often uses them like grids. But so it's the same thing as I was saying before. It's spokes, spokes, spokes on a wheel, guys. Just take it, the obvious. And that's the harmonizing great line. And then he has this distribution of these beautiful reds throughout the entire picture, the beautiful distribution of yellow, darks, and the interplay of darks. And it just keeps on happening. He's just entertaining and more entertaining and more entertaining. It just goes on and on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. I love this one on the left because it's so composed of lostness and this idea of featuring up. This is like pure chiaroscuro without shadows per se, meaning the lost and found model for us. But look at all this nothingness here. And yet again, what you're going to see again is there's these plays, the vertical here, and you see these vertical sticks and the vertical. Look at them, watch them play together. If they look good together, then the artist meant them, okay? It's really huge for you to own that in your mind. Even the travel from here into here and up into here, is this travel repeated? Is this happening here? Is it happening here again? Of course it is, sure it is, right? You see it, right? And this big, beautiful arcing, whatever it is, you might as well just consider it's a blob. Who knows what that actually represents? But you can see that this is playing on it, and all of which are playing on this line. This is all part of this other line that we're looking for. That's tending to support to counter what we've been talking about this way. By the way, one of the things about composition is take what's obvious. Don't go looking for multiple levels below stuff, and don't apply stuff you've heard in places. Go tell the golden mean to go away, to take it a hike, to any other rules anybody's told you. But listen to where the unities lie. We're talking about value unity, line unity, and color unity. That's all we're talking about. And then we're talking the interplay of these things. I mean, like these sick yellows over here that move up and have show again here, but then they're moving from that and becoming warmer, and it becomes travel of yellows, various variations in yellow. But you see him picking up, like right there, you see him picking up the very feeling of the same note. This is what we're talking about, the travel. This is the narrative about the yellows, the travel of the yellows, the other travels of the blues, right? You feel it happening? Or the reds out of here coming down through here. This is trucking. This is 1, 2, 3. This is rhymes and rhythms, runs, melodies, whatever you want to call them. I guess I have to stop. I think we're at the last one, so we're totally out of time. I want to thank all you guys again for your contributions and for your donations, comments, and all the rest. Anything else you want to talk about in relation to God, I'm always eager for. But I'm really trying to sell the ideas of the Boston School, some of which are encompassed in this, very much this discussion. And Gamble himself is a very interesting composer. So, and that is to say, the person I studied with, and on whom from whom my connection to the Boston School comes. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed that and can think possibly about waking yourself up pictorially and not getting stuck in the world of narrative, of anecdote or political statements or anything like it, and just remember what this form is. This is, in my view, this is it. This is the form at its purest. This is what all painting should do, no matter what it also does. That's me showing ultimately who I am. And so, I wish you the very best thinking this through. And in the meantime, have a great week and see you next week.